Thank you so much for joining us here on the Change Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Eric. If you're new here, thank you for giving us your time and joining us. If you're a regular, thank you for coming back. Today, we have Dr. Valentina Schneider, a leadership expert who combines data-driven insights and strategic solutions to help leaders and organizations build, strengthen, and sustain strong teams in high-performing organizations. Dr. Schneider, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Eric. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for everyone who's listening. And yeah, I can't wait to start our conversation.
Great. To start us off, would you mind giving us a little bit more info about you, your experiences, and some of the things that you might be working on lately?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a leadership advisor, and the last 6 years I was doing this in the area of academia. So I was doing my PhD in organizational behavior at London Business School. And London Business School is super practically oriented. So I was able to work with leaders along the way and directly apply some of the research we were doing over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was mainly focused on leadership, especially emotional intelligence in leadership. So I was looking at how empathy works, how vulnerable leadership works, at conflict management. And my goal is to bring these insights into the industry and a lot of the research that's already out there, because we already know so much about how leadership can be both effective and kind and impactful. And I'm excited to bring this to a new role that I'm soon going to start in leadership advisory as well.
This is a new role that you're going to be taking soon, or?
Yes, exactly. It's at Spencer Stewart for leadership advisory. So it's exactly the kind of work I was doing throughout the PhD, only now in a fully applied setting. And I hope to continue to be able to bridge the scientific findings we know and to do good science and research and apply that and help leaders become who they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Leaders becoming who they're supposed to be is the trick, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
who are they supposed to be?
Yeah. It's often a question of what kind of leader am I? What am I? How do I do it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one of those things that I think even for me, growing up in leadership, I just, how do you do this?
Yeah.
So it's great that you've got that on your docket for your upcoming role. Congratulations on that. I'm very excited for you.
Thank you. I am as well.
Awesome. Now, you did mention already many things that we're going to kind of chat about as we go through the podcast, but I'd like to ask you to start off with a question. Leaders oftentimes, when they start learning about how to lead, and even intuitively, they already get this idea that they understand what team behavior is and what individual behavior is, but they may not be thinking necessarily on a grander scale, like organizational behavior.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, organizational behavior. It's funny because before I started my PhD in it, I didn't really know what that meant either. I thought, is it how organizations behave? But no, it's actually how people behave in organizations. And in organizational behavior research, we also distinguish between micro, macro, and meso, so in between. So there are definitely different levels. And especially with leadership and leadership research, all of these level matters. So from the micro level, it matters what personality leaders have, how they think, how they behave. On a macro level, it matters how these behaviors play out in organizational structures under themes like power or hierarchy that come up in an organization. And then the meso level, how all of that gets connected, let's say at the team level, for example, in groups of different sizes. So all of that goes into the equation of what happens when leaders behave in certain ways, the impact they have on the teams they lead. And yeah, it's quite interesting, but I love it.
Yeah, it's really complex too. I think more often than not, people learn the lessons from the things that you're describing the hard way. They make bad decisions. There's a gentleman that I have a podcast with often. His name is Dr. Kevin Mays, and he has a book called Lead Yourself First. And he talks about the personal aspect of leadership and how you can't really lead other people effectively until you can lead yourself first.
Yeah.
And he goes into things like metacognitive leadership and how you can interject yourself into a bad decision before it's made. Pretty interesting stuff. And so I really applaud you for the work you did on organizational behavior, because I think, again, people know about teams, they know about individuals, of course, but the conglomerate of organizational behavior can be quite complex.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree. Like, you need to lead yourself first. So to me, self-leadership is always included in the grander scheme. And I actually think a lot of the lessons for leadership also apply for non-leaders, just because there's at least always one person you're leading, and it's yourself. Um, and yeah, it's just psychology, human behavior, but in an organizational setting. So like you're saying, different things are at play, and you need to understand the industry, your organization, upper management. So it's definitely not an easy job, but that's why I think it's so important that we help leaders to get there and help others.
Yeah, and that's the way you just described that last bit, helping our leaders. That's kind of the idea of managing the manager.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on managing the manager? Do you think that that's difficult, or?
So actually, already the word manager, it's kind of like, at least we started to frown upon it, because it's not, it's one part of the whole leadership aspect, managing others. But there are so many other things that go into it. And I feel like managing always seems like something needs to be, I don't know, pushed down or put in a box, or it's not really about empowering so much, but in general, maybe about leading the leader. Everybody could use some of that guidance. And I mean, now I've done research on, let's say, empathetic leadership for 6 years on a very high level. So of course I have like great advice in that area, and I would love to share it. But then someone else has done their thing, or they have practical advice over 20, 30 years. So I think it always helps to look to other people who've done a deep dive, or who've seen many different things and can connect things, and then let you help yourself. That's, I think, one of the strengths leaders have, if they are open to learning from others, even when they are in a leadership role.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things that we just got to remember. And also, as you were pointing out, the time that people have spent in that role, in most cases, will result in a better, we'll say, manager in this particular role. But they may not be very good leaders. And some,
exactly.
The unfortunate reality is that you won't know that until you get under them and you're working for them, and they turn out to be not really good leaders. They're good at telling you what to do, making deliverables happen.
Yeah, and I think that's why I was always interested in leadership, because from early on, I was surrounded by leadership through my dad, and I could see what impact it has on people. Like when we were in the car and he was on a business call, like he made a decision that impacted so many people and their daily life and their family situation. And based on who the leader is, how much they've worked on themselves, how open they are to others, how empathetic, it really changed the lives of so many. And now a lot of my friends, colleagues around me, one of the biggest problems of people not being even happy in life is because of their boss and their supervisors. And it's such a big impact that leaders have. So it's a great responsibility, but it's also a huge opportunity to actually do something good with it. And that's why I've always been interested in, just helping these people who have so much responsibility, because it's not even easy to lead yourself. And then suddenly you're in a position where now you have to lead other people, and you still have a supervisor usually, unless you're at the very, very top. And then the organization, different stakeholders are asking different things of you. And how are you gonna stay true to yourself, but also stay true to the role?
Yeah, absolutely. Such complex things to consider as we move into a professional world where we're trying to lead projects, lead people, We
Yeah.
have all of these things that we've got to manage. And
Yeah.
that's why we do podcasts like this, so that we can get experts like you to teach us how we've made, the mistakes and how to keep from making them.
Mm.
And a lot of the things that you and I are kind of going over right now, and some of the things that you're talking about, have that undertone of conflict. There's
Yeah.
and in your academic journey that you've had, you did a lot of important work on conflict management. What did you discover about innovative ways that we could address conflict?
Hmm. Yeah, so one of the first things was, or that research is still working on, is to figure out whether conflict is good or bad. And it's not that easy, as always. The deeper you get into anything, the more you understand that it's not black or white. Um, and I was also applying the emotional intelligence angle to conflict management. So I wanted to investigate, when conflict shows up, what would help to make conflict productive versus what makes it detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
So the first lens I applied was the empathy lens. And we also investigated with my co-authors um, how people with different inclinations of different types of empathy, maybe we can talk about that as well, that there are different types to that, but how that impacts how they engage in conflict resolution efforts, how successful they are, and what happens both, again, on an individual and on a team level. And first of all, is that we can still see that most conflicts they have detrimental effects. So in some ways, conflict can help, for example, to get everybody's opinion involved and to lead to more creative outcomes. When there are certain conflicts, especially when it's task conflicts, so conflicts about what needs to be done for a project, or what steps do we need to take. But then when we get to more personal conflicts, like relationship or status conflicts about just different values, people having different personality traits that bump head, or about hierarchy in a team, that these just throughout the bench, and the data shows that they're mostly still detrimental. So we definitely still need conflict resolution. And it's so imperative that we know how to deal with conflict, or even get engaged. It's usually the leader's job to handle the conflict resolution, and to do so in a way where it doesn't harm the team's relationship, but also performance. And there are a few different ways. One of the ways we found is always helpful is to have cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy is compared to affective empathy, that you understand what someone else is going through. So you just see their viewpoint, you can understand it, you take their perspective. Maybe you have an intuitive feeling for someone, how someone might be feeling. And affective empathy is when you actually feel someone else's emotions. So if one of your team members is upset, that you also get upset. But cognitive empathy, like taking someone's perspective, asking their viewpoint, it can really, really help in any type of conflict, in task, relationship, status conflicts, because it just shows that you have a willingness to understand others. It also makes you better able to handle conflict yourself if you're not getting emotionally involved. You take others' perspectives into account, and this way you can make decisions with the full information, and people feel heard and seen. And I think everybody knows that it can't always go your way. And sometimes the solution is not your viewpoint, but someone else's. But at least if you've been able to say your opinion, then conflict can be handled much better. And you know that in the next conflict, if it comes up, and it surely will, that your opinion will be listened to again. So also in conflict situations, the cognitive aspect of empathy is really important. And then we found that it leads to higher success rates of conflict resolution. It makes individuals engage more in them, and it really made teams perform better, both on a subjective level, so how they perceive their performance, but also on an objective level with financial data, and reduced, it reduced burnout as well if you focus on the cognitive side and not the affective side, the emotional side of empathy.
Yeah. You wrote about that online, and I'm going to ask a question about that shortly. And it was a good read to understand the two different types of empathy. And you've talked about some topics that were popping in my head as you're going through. I was like, oh, that's a really good one. That's a really good one. And I wanted to kind of run off into different directions in my head, but I can't remember half the things I'm supposed to. But one thing I did hear that really piqued my interest was escalation. There are so many leaders who they're not able to get a sense of how they are in that moment. And then they get into a room and they forget so quickly. If you walk in escalated, the room's going to escalate. If you walk in calm and professional, the room will generally be following suit. And so you made a really good point about the contagiousness of your attitude. And so that's a big deal for people to remember, that they need to, if they're not happy about something, and I do this often, if I'm not happy about something, or I've got a competing idea against people that are not super interested in mine, they just don't want to listen.
Yeah.
I usually stand outside the room and just remember that it's not my job to try to convince them. I just need to give them the information. If they want to deal with it, fine. If they don't, that's the decision. And the organization will kind of go in that direction that it goes.
The escalation, or this like emotional contagion, it's super real. And especially when you're in a higher power position, people will look to you and will take on your energy, your emotions, how you are in that moment. That's why also leaders are so important. For example, a leader who's generally more vulnerable about making mistakes or sharing some insecurities will also help the direct reports to be more vulnerable, just because people feel safe mirroring the leader's behavior. Because if the leader does it, then I'm also safer to do it. And so that's why leaders really need self-leadership, because they're leaders, but they're also role models in that sense.
Lead by example.
Yes.
Is very powerful. And also, one of the other things you talked about is data. And
Data.
Leaders love data, especially myself. When I'm trying to manage performance, or I'm trying to project the future state of my project, and you've been in data for a while, what kinds of data do you see leaders using, and how do they source it?
I love data as well. I think it's becoming, we know it's important, but just for decision making as well. Now, when you see anything online, I always want to look at the data because I've become so distrustful now after years in academia, and I know how high the standard is for published research on different levels, though. So it really matters how research is conducted or how data is used, and you can use it for your own benefit. You can use it to just find more evidence for what you were already thinking if you want to. But good data is always representative of, let's say, the population that you're interested in. So it should always include, different genders, different backgrounds. That's why diversity is so important as well. But if you don't use that in your data, then of course you're going to get a biased opinion even based on data. So how data is used is super important. And I think it's great that leaders are increasingly aware of that. And they, for example, they want to work together with universities or educational institutions where they can trust that this is good data that's being used, or they trust publishers or outlets that have established credentials of how data is used. Now AI is also increasingly used. I think there we also need to be a bit careful to how AI gets its data, and which is not always so transparent or easy to find out. So I still think science and research has a very big role in that. And then when we read a lot of the articles that leaders actually read, like HBR, Forbes, The Economist, when they listen to podcasts like these, I think it's also important that they are somehow based on the original science, and it takes quite some time to get down to an issue, because even like now, I mean, I've run so many studies now with so much data, surveys, experiments, but you need all of this to become more and more sure that the statement you're making is actually valid and can also be applied in different settings.
Hmm.
So yeah, data is another thing that's super complex,
Yeah, it is.
but
And
important.
in my background, that it was focused a lot on a profession that required a lot of critical thinking.
Hmm.
And I have a long, not I don't have the PhD, but in my graduate studies, of course, we write a lot of papers, of
Yeah,
course, and I think a lot of times that unless if you have younger individuals coming into the field and they don't know how things are going to work in their first job,
yeah,
they don't know how they graduate uh, with a bachelor's degree, they leave right after 4 years of school, they go right into a internship, they get into a position, and they wonder. And I'm talking from experience in a large corporation.
yeah,
They wonder how it's going to work. And the conversation that I have with them is about the integrity of the data that supports the evidence of what you're trying to do.
yeah,
So don't come into my office and tell me that it's going to work, X is going to work, because I have data that supports that. And then I'm going to ask you, where did you get this data?
yeah.
And for what reason did you pick that data? And
Hmm.
is it primary or secondary source data?
Yeah,
And they're going to say, well, I found it on X and X platform. I got it from X and X uh, peer reviewed article. I got it from X and X place. And I'll say, well, what qualified you to pick that one over, say, another one? Because often the point that I'm getting at is that people will pick data that provides them the bias to say my idea is correct and it will work. When in
exactly.
fact, what we need to be trying to do is disprove our
Hmm.
idea that something's working. And I
Yeah.
think in the terms of leadership, that doesn't happen enough. I think
Mhm.
leaders come in and they say, well, if Sandy did what I told her to do in the way that I told her to do it, based on my understanding of how this should be run, it would have worked.
Mm.
And I always say, but what reasons did you give her to go out and find alternatives? How are you quantifying this or qualifying that? And so,
Yeah, this confirmation bias, that's exactly it's a huge problem, because you can always find data that supports what you were already thinking. And
and it's natural to do that, isn't it?
it yes, it's
Yeah.
definitely the easier
Mm-hmm.
way, because it's much nicer to get something confirmed that we were thinking than but I think critical thinking itself means that you're actually thinking critically about your own opinion. So I, for example, have my AI that I'm using now for a lot of things set to in the settings to always give me the other viewpoint as well for everything. And it's a bit annoying. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, do I always need to hear the other side? But at least it also gets me in a habit of thinking, how could this be? Or when I hear an opposing opinion to what I was thinking, I'm super interested, because I'm like, how did they derive there?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why there are still some sources we can rely on for actually people trying their best to find the actual outcome or the actual effect and impact, not in a biased way. And I don't think it's news, it's not social media. But in that sense, I would say it really is. When you look at research and science, there's a ranking of different journals, for example, and the higher you go to like AA plus, then there's really a lot of rigor to not have confirmation or so many other biases we have to protect against in our research, and doing experiments, for example, where you hold every condition the same except the one thing you're interested in, so that you're not getting a different effect because you're now looking at a different country or a different age group, for example. And I think that's why, to me, it's so important to bridge research and practice, because both can contribute so much from one another. On the other hand, research is somehow so like, I've been researching empathy now for 6, 7 years, and it's still very Like it's such a long process to publish something in an academic journal, even though the topic of empathy has been at its height like 2-3 years ago. A lot of like outlets were saying emotional intelligence, empathy is a trait to watch in leaders. And I'm like, we're like too slow. So I wish academia and practice can be more connected, because both can benefit from one another. It needs to be close, especially in business research. It needs to be close to business. That's the real world. Um, but academia itself is great because it really tries to get rid of so many biases and tries to really look at the effects. And I think if leaders know where to look for the information in that way, for example, if you want to find out, what's a good example? Well, let's just say, let's use empathy. If empathy works or not, then don't look for, I'm very empathetic. Is that a good thing? But just ask, what is the effect of empathy?
Yeah.
As neutral as possible, and then see what you can find. And if you find one opinion, then look for the other side to it as well. What's great is that now more and more meta-analyses have been done. So meta-analysis is a study that combines many different research studies that have been done on the topic before. So then even one paper just looks at a few studies in one certain setting. But a meta-analysis actually uses, I don't know, up to a few hundred studies together and looks at the overall effect, which can be interesting. But then again, we have all of these organizational factors, and does it work in my country, maybe not in another country with a higher power distance, or whatever the differences might be. So yeah, it takes a lot of time and energy, and I understand that leaders might not always have that for every decision. So it's really not easy.
Yeah, the big takeaway, I think, for a lot of our listeners should know, they should just take this part away from everything you just said, is that the amount of research effort going into studying emotional intelligence and empathetic leadership and all the things you described only substantiates the importance of how emotional leadership, it can be powerful or it can be detrimental. Because too many people, I think, they're all looking at the PMI statute of what, 5-6 years ago, the PMI used to say leadership was. You've got some deliverables, you've got cost, scope, time, all these things that go into that, and you got to put all this in order, and you got your work breakdown structures and your time charts and your schedules, and you got all this cool stuff and stakeholder engagement. And they didn't put a lot of value on emotional intelligence and empathetic leadership and just all these things that we are talking about.
Yeah.
And I think as people begin to their career in leadership, they should be really putting a bit more emphasis on this. And it's a really good segue into this idea that these things can get formulated and get resolved and have new ideas come out, supportive ideas, when you when you do this across teams. And I believe that cross-functional performance is one of the critical values or critical things that we would do to increase value delivery in a present and the future projects that someone would lead. I found that if someone goes into a boardroom and a supervisor says, "Hey, we want to see what your strategy will be. What's your strategic initiative going to be for AI use? Maybe you're going to create a chat GPT tool for our company." And that's great. Now there's a one-way street. The supervisor is asking me to come up with a strategic initiative and deliver something on that. And what actually is better is when you have cross-functional teams working on all of these different things. So maybe Eric has expertise in GPT building. That's even a thing. And then there's other teams that have expertise in back-end infrastructure, and they have other teams that have actually done this already, and some that are coders, and some that are model people and prompt engineers. And so my point is that I think that cross-functional performance is really critical to delivering value rather than a siloed approach. How have your clients responded to implementations of cross-functional initiatives?
Well, to me, cross-functional also then means you need to be able to work with people, right? So it's not just about you get your task of building the GPT and then you do it. But well, if we're speaking from a leadership perspective here, then you're in this leadership role and you have to manage cross-functional teams or your team, and then you are the connecting point to other teams. So my view in that would always then be about how to handle the relationships in that and how to solve or how to approach competing demands. And again, it will bring us back to conflict because it will likely arise. It will bring us back to diversity because that can happen in many different ways. As you mentioned, people just have different expertise in different things. And I think that's where emotional intelligence comes in, to be able to deal with the human aspects of the cross-functional teams. So what the leaders we worked with or that we looked at as participants, as students, as in executive programs, they're usually very good at their expertise job, how they got to the leadership role. And then you're suddenly in a position where you have to manage people. And then that's where a lot of the work that we do comes in, how they can incorporate that without losing their effectiveness, without losing the focus on the tasks. And yeah, it can be very individualistic in some ways, but then also data shows that there are overall effects that can be applied to different situations that we can always use as guidelines to do so.
Yeah. Really great information. I think people need to be ready for that when they go into a room where they've got multiple different people with a lot of expertise on their head, and they can just, take advantage of that and try to get them linked, instead of working in such a siloed role.
And use conflict for good, like get people talking who might have very different viewpoints or ideas. But then if you're good at like conflict management, then you can take out all the good stuff of it, get different people to work together, and then deal with maybe sometimes ego comes up or different values or just different personality traits clashing. And then emotional intelligence is key to make that cross-functional work happen, so that it can take all of the benefits out of it.
Yeah. And this aligns really, really well with something that you wrote online. I don't remember when. I've read it maybe a month ago or whenever. This is the dilemma that you talk about on your online post about the differences. And you mentioned it just a little bit before in the beginning of the podcast, nice or effective.
Yeah.
And you mentioned also in that article that it's that dilemma is kind of a lose-lose hand unless you really understand the game and that game is kind of rigged, as you put it. Can you unpack that for me?
Yeah, so I hope it's not lose-lose.
I hope not, yeah.
The game is rigged for certain people, but in general, I think there's this misconception that nice and good can work together, and I think it comes from this thing of assertiveness being basically the same as the opposite of agreeableness. So someone who's agreeable, which is someone who's friendly and kind and warm, agreeableness means that you care about maintaining positive relationships. That's a great thing. But that's often equated with someone who's not able to take a stand, to make a tough decision, to say what they want, to ask for the raise that they deserve, or to guide a team through conflict or through a crisis. And that's usually assertiveness. And they are not the same thing. They are negatively correlated. So someone who's very agreeable, like needs to maintain positive relationships, is likely to be lower in assertiveness. So that's a thing. But there's definitely a way to do both. And for agreeableness on the one side, we see that the effect overall for leaders, so for people in leadership positions, it's it's positive,
Mm-hmm.
especially for, let's say, more relational outcomes like psychological safety, reducing turnover, employee satisfaction, work satisfaction. And assertiveness, on the other hand, it's not a straight line, it's a curved effect. So assertiveness is great at a medium level once you're in a leadership position. And I want to highlight that because you need assertiveness to make it to a leadership position. So the most assertive people usually make it to leadership positions. But then it's the people who are at the lower end of the assertiveness spectrum who are the most successful leaders. And that's because, again, assertiveness works as a curve. And at very low levels, people don't believe that you're able to be a good leader, to help a team stir through a storm, or to even get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So it might have some social benefits that people will like you more because you're not a bulldozer, but it has some instrumental downsides. And leaders still need to achieve a bottom line and fulfill their tasks. On the higher end, so if someone is too assertive, then they're seen as this bulldozer and they have a lot of social costs. People don't like them. And we now know that leadership effectiveness comes from both competence and warmth. So these are two basic dimensions of how humans are judged. Whether someone is warm, so what are their intentions towards me? And how competent are they? Do they have the ability to follow their intentions? And leaders need to be both. They need to be warm, so they need to have good intentions with me, with the company, with themselves. But they also need to be competent enough to go for those. And too low assertiveness just means they might not have the competence to do so. And too high assertiveness means they might not be warm enough to be a good leader.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the middle ground, there's this magic realm of medium assertiveness where assertiveness almost doesn't come up. So if there's a leader who's exactly in the sweet spot, no one really says, oh, he's the perfect level of assertive. It would usually just fade in the background, and it would give way to the other leadership traits that are important. And then people can focus on the intelligence or the passion or the ideas or the vision. And that's where leaders should really be for the highest levels of effectiveness. And now the lose-lose perception, again, I don't think it's lose-lose. It's just it's a rigged game because it's more difficult for some people than for others to get there. And that's especially for women and for people of color or from minorities. And that's because, let's start with the gender first. You're judged based on warmth and competence, and that's also based on gender norms. And for men, the gender norm is this agentic type. So agentic is more associated with competence and assertiveness. That coincides with the stereotypical image of a leader. Mm-hmm. So how a man should act is also how a leader should act. So if you're assertive as a man, you're in line with the gender stereotype and in line with the leader stereotype. Good for you. As a woman, the gender stereotype is that you're supposed to be more communal and warmth oriented. So then when you're assertive as a woman, you're in line with the leader stereotype, but not with the gendered expectation. So you're violating gender norms, and you will probably get penalized for that. And then you'll be called a bitch. I don't know if I can swear here, but
yeah,
okay,
you can.
Well, I just did.
Good. No edits.
Okay, no beep.
Nope.
On the other hand, if you're, let's say, very agreeable and low in assertiveness and very communal, warm, then you're in line with with the expectation for how a woman should be, but not for how a leader should be. And that's why you might not make it to a leadership role. So that's where the game is rigged, and that just you can transfer that to different countries as well. Some Asian cultures have a a more communal view as well, where assertiveness is not as rewarded as in other Western countries. So it really helps to find out what the expectations for you are as a person, because I don't think we can deny that there are differences to how people are treated. We're working hard to give everyone an equal opportunity, but I don't know if we can ever beat these gender views or norms, like they're so deeply ingrained with us, in us. So yeah, maybe to offer a solution to this problem is to really try to experiment a little bit and see. If you're in a leadership role, you will probably get some feedback either through like a leadership survey, or ask a trusted advisor if you haven't gotten feedback on how your level of assertiveness is, and if you're seen as maybe too well, let's say not warm enough or not competent enough. And then you can adjust this to different situations. So with your team, maybe you don't need to be as assertive, but you can be a little bit less assertive and ask more opinions, show more cognitive empathy and get their perspectives more. Also, maybe follow their guidelines if you think they have good ideas. Um, and then in other situations, let's say you are working with other teams, then and you need to get through somewhere, then you might need to be more assertive with other people. So it's a little experimentation is needed of how that works. Um, and yeah, it really, first of all, self-awareness, which can come through feedback from others, where you stand. And usually you would get feedback like, you need to be a bit more assertive to get your way. Or you're seen as a bit intimidating. People are scared to speak out. So both of those are at the non-effective ends of at the corners of the effectiveness curve. And then you can try to work on that.
Yeah. Two things that really hit home with me when you're talking is on assertiveness. Is in my background, the type of work that I did and still do, there's a large population of people who are in management roles that came directly from the military. So these individuals come out of the military, they retire, or maybe not. They just come from the military world, and they go into a corporate world. And in the military, the type of assertiveness that you were describing as like go forward, strong, the type you were talking about has its place in roles like that when you're in a warrior environment, to say. There's a reason why military leaders typically yell and expect an immediate response, because in the time when you have life and death situations like that and you've got to react, you don't have time for someone to critically think about this request. But that's one thing that I remember. And I found that often it was very difficult for leaders coming and making that transition from military life into corporate life to drop the over-assertiveness. They often carried it in, and it created a real batch of conflicts around in the team. I saw it firsthand from people. Even my boss did it to people that worked for me. And I was like, you can't do that, And so it does take a lot of, just insight, that maybe a bit of common sense. Like, I can't talk that way to these people.
Different world.
And then two, the second point is that I also saw firsthand where I had female leaders that I respected very highly for the things that they accomplished and for how they handled things that didn't quite go their way. And I also was very keen to understand that they have to have that assertiveness, right? Because as you described in the gender perspective, and how males are seen and how females are seen. It's not just also, hey, that person is seen as, or maybe they get themselves into a bit of a stick for being too assertive. But I saw people that came to me and said, hey, Miss So-and-so was assertive, and they expected her to be a bit more warm, a bit motherly. And then they got into the room and they said, this is what I want to do. And maybe they responded with, this young lady responded with, that's not going to happen, or go back and redo that. and they were assertive in the way that they wanted to get this project moving. And the individual who was the receiver of that came to me and would say, so and so is not, they're the B, they're a bitch about this. I don't understand why they're doing it this way. I don't like it. And all of a sudden they've got this notion that that person is a bad leader.
Yeah.
And I would always silently kind of fight that battle for her, because it wasn't deserved.
Yeah.
We're just trying to make people understand that everybody has a role to play. They're responsible for stuff.
Yeah. It's, I also have like two viewpoints on, well, I just see it this way. These things exist, and maybe they shouldn't exist. They shouldn't exist. It's not fair. So we're continuously trying to break these stereotypes, at least about, let's say, what a leader should look like, and how, well, in that realm, how assertive women should be. But while getting there, we also need to acknowledge that these do exist. So in that case, like the female leader you were talking about, I think it would be helpful for her to know that this exists. And unfortunately, because she is a woman, she will be expected to have more warmth than her male counterparts. And then she can decide what she wants to do with it. Does she want to fight it and fight for a new image of what a leader should look like? Or does she want to make it to a higher position? Or maybe she needs to be perceived in a slightly warmer way to get her way and play the game a little bit, even though it is rigged. So my strategy would be, just for me, to say these things you can always adjust your tone a little bit. You can be assertive, but still be slightly warm with that and say, thank you, but no, we're doing it this way. That's why. And then, to get your way and to get through the position, so that in the end, we need to get more diverse people into these leadership positions, so that we have the allies there to get others there, or to change the stereotypical look of what a leader looks like. But we need to make it there first.
Yeah.
And there are these hurdles in the way. So we might have to at least be aware of the game. And then again, you can still, you can still choose to fight it, or you can choose to fight it once you're there. But for yourself, it might be easier to first get to this position and then try to change the image from the inside.
Well, let's pull on this a little bit. I mean, this is a topic I would bet money that listeners are probably going to be very keen to listening to. Let's talk about women in leadership for just a second. And I want to ask your opinion on this. Let's say that you're a young lady goes into a new role. She's a leader, and she's got people working for her. And then her boss is a male, and he's an over-assertive individual who almost has this, he portrays this idea that she's less than him, maybe not as good at leading than him. He has an ego issue, maybe what it is. What can women leaders do to put on armor, if you will, in a metaphorical sense, to get up and say, listen, I'm going to address this male leadership problem that I've got?
I recently talked about this with a friend, actually, that I feel like, unfortunately, we're always adjusting downwards. We almost have to get away. So she was dealing with a quite assertive male colleague who was very much looking at like status and how everything looks toward the outside. And then to get her way, she had to basically put that into her communication as well to get him to listen. Even though she doesn't really do that usually. And I see this everywhere on a personal level as well as at work, that we unfortunately always adjust, let's say, downward to the level that's not as good or where we should go. So I would say for this female leader you were describing, it's going to be hard to actually get to a higher position if she's going to show behaviors or fight her boss on it. Because he still has the power. And if there are not other senior leaders, maybe on the same level as her boss or a level over him, who are different and where she could turn to, then this is the person who's responsible for her promotion and for how she can rise. So if she tries to fight his behaviors and tell him off that he's too assertive, I don't know if she's gonna make it, just because it's gonna be difficult to get this person to change his mind immediately.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think people that are like that, the
exactly,
males are, they're just stubborn. They're not going to change, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it is, I totally agree with you, a huge risk
yeah,
to stand at that cliff and say, am I going to assert my belief here
yeah,
and go after and do what's right, that hard right, and talk to that boss about it? I mean, obviously this is much more complex than what we're kind of describing it in this moment, this discrete bit.
yeah,
But I've talked about on podcasts before and with other guests about having that courage to figure out the strategic way to address it. I
mm,
myself have had a situation from male to male who had that problem. I was a male leader. I had people with me. Something happened. This individual above me believed it was my fault for whatever reason. I'm
yeah,
not sure why. It was not. And I went to his office after having been told that so and so believes you were the problem. And I thought to myself before I went into the door, I was like, you realize, and I'm talking to myself, what you're about to do. You're about to go into a risk-filled environment where you could ruin a career.
mm,
This individual had the power to fire me, to shun me away from that, take away my ability to lead anything anymore, and just put me in the back and mop the floors, if you will.
yeah,
And I thought I would not be able to live with it if I didn't go after this. It's
mhm,
not fair, you know? And I don't like to say that because it's sort of the 12-year-old
yeah,
child's view, but it wasn't fair
yeah,
that I was getting. And so I went in there and I spoke to this individual and made my case. The individual didn't have a lot of response, both in words or in emotion. And basically, I left the room not knowing exactly if this had been resolved or not. And it
yeah,
turns out about a week later, we came across each other again in the hallway, and they said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about that conversation we had in my office about what you believe did or was not your fault." And I didn't say anything. And he's like, "I want to let you know that one, I agree, it was not your fault, and two, the respect that I've had for you may or may not have been substantial, but now it is because you
mm,
stood in front of me and you told me about it. Now I got lucky because, like you've described, this could have been a real problem."
yeah.
And so I think there's a bit of assessment that needs to be made before people make that judgment on whether they're going to go after and defend themselves.
Yeah, even
But
though I would distinguish between defending myself and then, let's say, telling someone else that they need to change.
true,
So I
yeah.
would always say, please defend yourself, stand up for yourself. I think that's part of assertiveness. And that level, if you are not even able to defend yourself, like if you are blamed for something that you didn't do, and then in a rational way, like you did, you talk to the individual and explain why it wasn't your fault. If you're not able to do that, then I think it's such a toxic environment that maybe there's a better chance to leave. Uh,
Hmm.
but so with the defending part, yeah, don't take blame for something you didn't do. But I think when it's about, like earlier we were talking about this boss who was super like, I don't know, it's assertive and had an ego, and how the woman should behave, or the female leader, in terms of whether she should tell him off or not, or at least that's how I understood it. And I
Hmm.
think that's more well, both can be dangerous, but that's even more dangerous because then you're directly telling someone else they did something wrong. And I
Hmm.
think that's tricky. But I totally agree with you that it's good that you defended yourself, and I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, me too. I had a
Yeah.
pretty stiff drink afterwards.
Yeah. um,
um,
yeah.
so we talked a lot about so a lot of different subjects. Are very, very interesting. I want to ask a kind of a final question to you. Um, can you give me a story about some time when you faced something really challenging and how you moved kind of this negative idea that maybe you'll fail or something was going to go bad to something positive that helped you succeed?
Good question. So, well, I have a story of how I failed and
Oh,
how I
great.
into something positive.
I'm sorry that you failed, but great that you learned, and let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean, so I was playing college tennis in the US with a full scholarship. So that
This
was
was in Kentucky. Was that what it was?
exactly, yeah.
Uh,
And then well, you go and you plan to go there for 4 years for the whole like American college system, and of course, um, yeah, it turned out to be quite the experience to me because I just couldn't perform at the level I was expected to from myself, from the coach there. It was quite a different tennis environment, training environment to what I was used to, and I couldn't handle the pressure there, and I just didn't perform.
mhm,
No matter what the reasons are, I just didn't, and I was given the scholarship to perform, and then I lost the scholarship, and that was like a world breaking down in some way. I think it was the first time. I mean, from tennis, you of course learn to lose so much, but I think that was one of the, let's say, first major failures.
mhm,
And I was thinking of, should I go to a different university or what should I do? And I changed my plan. And in the end, it was the best thing that could have ever happened. I don't know if I love tennis and training, but the pressure, the environment, that especially for tennis, I always knew I wanted to do something else as well and not become a professional tennis player. But I don't think I would have been strong enough to make the decision for myself to go home after a year and stop this experience. So
mhm,
basically to acknowledge that it may not be working out for me. And in that moment, someone else had to make the decision for me, which was my coach and also my parents. They were like, "Come home."
mhm,
Um, but I think this taught me so much. First of all, not to make too long-term plans because I just don't make them anymore because everything can always happen. I have this kind of idea of where I want my career to go, but then it's not for more than, let's say, three years or whatever. And this failure also just shows that there are just realities in this world. If you don't perform, then you might not, like, you might lose your job, or so there are just certain rules you have to adhere to, um, but that you can always find yourself again and make something positive out of it. I believe in what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
yeah.
And also that everything happens for a reason, which is always much easier to see now, 15 years afterwards, and where it has led me. And it's led me to exactly where I want to be. And I don't think I would have been, again, I was 19. I wouldn't have been able to make the decision for myself. So sometimes if these things happen to you, maybe they are someone watching out for you because you might have not been able to make that decision for yourself. It's especially hard if you're good at something. With academia now as well, I could have continued to stay in academia and go to, like, take on a faculty role, and that was a harder decision to make because it was my decision. No one really told me to leave,
Mhm,
and I was good at the research, and I also like to be there, but I think this other experience showed me that sometimes you need to be strong enough to make your own decisions, but if you're not and a decision is made for you, maybe that's actually a blessing in disguise,
mhm.
and you can find ways to start again.
Yeah, great advice. I mean, I just think that so many people get too wrapped up in the meaning of why this is happening, and
Yeah,
in a negative way. They'll say, "Why is me? Why me? Why me?" I mean,
yeah.
everybody does it. I've done it too. But yeah, great advice, and
Mm.
good on you for looking inwardly and saying that this is all something that's a learning moment, and I'm going to grow from it. And it taught you more about what you want and what you don't want.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's a really, really awesome story. I really appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I will wind it down. I really do want to thank you again for taking the time to join us here on the show. Your insights, the things that you've talked about, all of your experience. Um, just a really good, valuable input to the listeners and what they need to be doing to be better leaders and to be better people. And I think it's just a real blessing that you were able to come on the show and be with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. And I'm just very happy for any platform that, is focused, any person like you who's focused on, like you said, not just making leaders better, but making people better, because I really think we need that in this world right now.
Yes, we do. That can go in so many ways, but you're absolutely right. The world needs better people.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much. Take good care of yourself, and hopefully we'll see you back on the show shortly.
Thank you. It was lovely to speak with you as well. Bye, Eric.
Take care.